starting now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm Jimmie Meadows, and I think it's important for people to know the process in which an attorney is given to you in a CPS court case. If you make too much money, you won't. If you make too much money and don't have enough money, an attorney will not be appointed to you. In other words, I personally was making $30 an hour, but I had a spouse who spent everything, and when they took the kids, I couldn't get an attorney. When I found out the laws of what it would take to get an attorney, I was told, you make too much, you're going to have to sell everything you have in order to get one. We're sorry. I went through 5.5 months of trying to find an attorney, and the state started threatening default. At that point, I finally got laid off, and that attorney told me within 5 minutes of reading my documents that, well, Mr. Meadows, you should just sign the paperwork now. They're going to win the default. And if you fight it out and it goes out another 2 months, then you're at 7.5 months out, and it starts, 1 year from the day that they pick up the kids can be adopted off. At 6 months, they can start looking for adoptive families. At 9 months, they can be placed. And at 12 months, you lose your rights. So when I had the default, it was under duress. And anybody else who has their kids taken, if you don't have the money saved, you're in financial trauma. You got to ask yourself, if my kids were taken today, would I have an attorney? No, you would not. If you're absolutely out of money and you don't work and you don't do anything else, well, then at that point, you might get an attorney. So the law needs to be changed so that if you ask for one, you get one. And it doesn't matter how much money you make, let alone the attorneys that they give you. They got to represent the best of what you can get. Just the same as if you're going into court for a murder trial or anything else. Those are your children. And you should be given the attorney that can actually fight for you and wants to. Not just somebody to pass the law and pass the paper back and forth. Because that's what you end up receiving. And when that lady told me that she read my case for 5 minutes and said I should have defaulted, I had no choice but to say okay, because I got no help anywhere and I'm running out of time. I ended up writing out 50 pages of what I already see that's wrong with my case. I think I completely denounced it, and it's taken them since December 11th. Today is June 17th to get me my records, and I'm still waiting on it. So if you think you're going to come back and get them some other day, if you got a case, they're not going to relinquish those records without court action. So the law needs to be changed. It's not something you can just do on a whim. If you don't have the money, and they say you should, they can take your kids like any kidnapper in the world, pick them up, take them away, and you have no way to fight it. It's like having somebody come in and, like a true kidnapper, and you know they got your kids. And you know there's nothing you can do. There's absolutely nothing. It's worse than your kids actually being kidnapped. Now the bottom line is that, as the story goes, people can always make up their own assumptions. I was only implicated for saying one thing out of 20 allegations. That was, I will try to get my son to his appointments. That's what the only thing they used against me out of 20 allegations that have my kids kept away from me. Wow. So when you ask yourself, well, I didn't do nothing. It doesn't matter in the eyes of the court. They got your kids, and now you're going to jump hoops. I went through 5 termination hearings. They took my kids in on the same docket. They split the docket within 1.5 years' time when they sent back my other son. He was signed. Wyatt was sent to come home. It still took them 3.5 months to get him home because of paperwork shuffling. We're sorry, Mr. Meadows. My other son, they claimed that he had autism, and he didn't have autism. The claim came up shortly in a time frame of what else could they do, because I was about to win it all then. They brought that up and then used it against me that I denied the fact that he had autism. 2 weeks before the state signed off, the developmental psychologist at Mary Bridge, the local child health care facility, said no, he has no more signs of PDD. The sign of, that's the autism, pervasive developmental disorder.
My daughter's mom had that. I think she's developing.
But the issue is that pervasive developmental disorder is a broad spectrum diagnosis. And the kids can grow out of it possibly. But they use that as a reason for me not to get my son back. But I fought long enough. did what I was told to, and you have no choice but to play the game, but never give up the fight. So if I can get a law changed and get people to understand that everybody deserves representation, then that's what you need. Because without it, you're just screwed. They could come in, pick up your kids, and make their $50,000 per head. Because that's what it's all about. This state right now, if anybody knows, along with other states, they're in financial dire trouble.
Yep.
So the first place they're going to cut is DSHS.
Oh, yeah.
The first place they can get money from then as a money resource is adopting children.
How dare they sell them?
So when they got my kids, they actually knew in the allegation list that I was in financial trouble, according to the one referral that was given from a local healthcare facility, saying that we didn't pay our bill on time, which it was only 2 months past due. But nonetheless, they knew we were in financial trouble. They knew what they were doing when they picked up the kids and knew that I wouldn't be able to afford an attorney. They knew I was working on the road, as they profess in the actual referral. They knew what they had. Now, if I was a drug addict and I wasn't working and I was indigent and, wow, I just lost my kids, the state knows that you're probably not going to have the wherewithal to fight it. If you have the money and you're not a drug addict and a person who actually does child abuse, then they know that they got a fight on their hands. They won't fight you. But if they think they got a fighting chance, that's all they want. Because if I made $200,000 a year and had plenty of money to fight it with an attorney with the case they have, they wouldn't have came after me. But they thought they had a chance. And to say, well, if you had the money, you wouldn't have the problem, not the case. My ex-wife got addicted to painkillers, and it can happen to anybody.
And those are the things that when you report somebody for drug use, they'll ignore.
Yeah.
Yeah, they won't even bring it up in court that you're addicted to methadone. So, and it's one of the most addictive drugs out there. Like, people will crush the tablets and store them up until they started creating the extended release type.
Well, the bottom line is that I know all about these drugs. The extended release, they still crush those because the extended release, when you crush them, that's when the extended release is gone. But it's not about drugs for me. My wife, I won in the custody case in the courtroom after everything was done. She has to stand up for everything that I had to. Because if you want to fight the system, if you want to make it happen, there's only one thing to do. That is to do everything absolutely right. You have no choice. You can't say, I'm going to fight it and I'm still going to live my life the way I want. You have to stop drinking. You have to stop doing drugs. You have to go to all their classes and you have to make a full-hearted attempt to make sure that you make them happy. And then still fight them on the same page. So, if somebody wants their kids back and they've already been taken, they need to accept that their lives are in jeopardy. They need to do everything they're told to, but then fight the good fight.
When you become a parent, and all of a sudden you lose your kids, you lose your purpose. It doesn't matter how many friends you have or what type of the social network you have or any of that stuff. When you lose your kids, that is everything. And that's why so many parents that go through this process end up committing suicide eventually. Because they have nobody out there looking out for them.
Well, they asked me. They said, numerous times the social worker had asked me, he said, well, wouldn't you at least want to adopt Bobby off? He's so young and he's in a good home. They took my son Robert when he was 8 months old. Well, no, not 9 months old. 12/20/07 he was born. They took my kids 8/10/08.
So he's 9 then, probably.
No, he's 4.5 now. And they said that since he was so young and I didn't know him, and I didn't have a maternal need for him, is it possible that you just want to adopt him off? Oh. And I said, no, I don't want to adopt him off. He's my son. Yeah. The social worker looked at me as if I was crazy. And he's your son.
She probably has no kids.
She has a daughter who was 13 at the time.
Probably in CPS custody.
No, that's her. She's a social worker.
Yeah.
So
I've seen it.
It leaves to wonder when it comes to father's rights, and they're asking me to adopt my son off because, well, why do you want him? You're just the dad. And when they took him, he was just a tiny little baby, and he doesn't know you. And if he left now, he would never know you. That's crazy talk. Nobody lets their kids just go without the fight of their life. And any other parent in this problem, if they're not willing to do everything they're told to do, well, then they're not the real parent. You need to hold that sign, mister.
Oh, sorry.
Is that, the idea is that if any parent says, I'll walk through fire for my kids, really? Really? Are you really willing to walk through fire? You got to do it. And walking through the fire means you have to go down with a bunch of drug addicts and have some pervert watch you pee in a cup every day they tell you to. If it means that you have to go into parenting classes by a parent that doesn't know a damn thing about parenting, the guy didn't even have kids. I got rid of him. I protested. I fought it. I got another guy came in. He has kids. He's done it for 17 years, the teaching and everything. I sat back, did what I did on a usual basis, and that guy said this guy's a stellar parent and I don't understand why the state is messing with him. And that came into his report to DSHS. So I did all those little things that seem big to somebody else, but if you're not willing to stand up and do what you're supposed to, really walk through fire, then they're going to say that you don't deserve your kids because anybody who wanted them would. And when it's over and done and they know they pushed it, they'll say, well, we did it to vet you. You understand the word vetting? They're going to vet you.
They're going to look through everything.
And they're going to push you. They're going to run your life. And they could care less if they had a right to do it in the first place.
Or how about the harm your kids?
Exactly. When they took Wyatt was 5. I had taken him down on a Friday morning down to the Viking house down in Purdy, Washington. I came back up the hill with him with an ice cream cone coming around the big Wanna curve. If you know where I'm talking about, you go, yeah, the Wanna curve. And I got a phone call from my wife who said that the sheriff and DSHS were at the house. We showed up to the house, and within 15 minutes, my little boy was in the back of a car pulling out with that ice cream still in his hand.
Yeah, so the second time, or was that the first time?
They told me that they would not allow me to see him because he needed his time to adjust. Within that first 2 months is what ended up happening is he was sexually assaulted by I call it sexual assault,
yeah, definitely,
by the foster mom because he wet the bed. I know this because the next people who got him was my brother and sister, brother and sister-in-law. He woke up crying in the middle of the night because he wet the bed. He was asked, why are you crying? All you did was wet the bed. That's when he told the story that he was scrubbed with a pot scrubber on his genitals and told if you ever pee in their bed again, you're going to get it even worse. When the state was told, I had no idea at this time. I was on supervised visits and didn't even know where he was living. The social worker came back to me and said, your son's making outlandish claims and you should just ignore him. He's going through a hard time. Later on, since he hardly wants to talk about it, but when he would go to Chuck E. Cheese in Tacoma, they made my little guy, after going through all that, sit in the car because they said it was a family function and he wasn't allowed to be a part of it. So my little guy, after going through all that, is sitting inside this van with everybody else going into Chuck E. Cheese. Those are the kinds of foster parents you have because they're making money and they could care less about the kids.
Yeah,
the one that did, who got him after a year had went by because my sister-in-law couldn't handle it. Nonetheless, it's more family trauma. That foster mom came into court in tears saying this man deserves his son. And it was at that point they finally said he can go home, but it wasn't for another 3.5 to 4 months till he was actually in my residence. Then it goes another 6 months after that. Then after that 6 months, well, we don't have the paperwork done yet, but I had to wait another 2 more months in fear that if anything went wrong in my life, that they would pick him up and say, do it all over again. Yep. So you have to be diligent. And anybody who says, they took my kids and I'm just going to stand out here and protest it, this is the end.
Well, I know that this is an interview, but what started the whole thing? Like, they break into your house one morning and was like...
The whole story, if people want to see it, you could send me a request at swodeam@hotmail.com. I wrote out 50 pages. Somebody said, Jimmy, you need to put in what got you here, your personal history. And I was willing to do it. I did everything. So I explained what problems my wife had, and I accept them. but they weren't as bad as to have your children taken. And within at 5.5 months is when I defaulted. And by 6.5 months, before I climbed a steel tower in Shelton, Washington, I found out that they were adopting him off. So what I did is remarkable, because of most people, like he said, some people commit suicide at 5.5 months and they say we're going to adopt off, they back out. Again, I was asked by the social workers, how do you find the ability to keep on fighting this? Because it's my son. And because this guy here was put into adoption. I didn't want to see my son be mistreated or think that somebody didn't love him. So I fought like hell and I got him. He's at his grandma's house right now. Same with his 4-year-old brother. But if you want to hear more of the story, sure, I can sit here and tell you ins and outs. But it is detailed in that 50-page thing, which I sent it to every news agency, everywhere. I had people who said they wanted me in a documentary. I had somebody else say that they want me to do this and they were going to do that, and nothing's ever came through. So if you want it to happen, be proactive.
Amen.
And when somebody gives you a phone call, you do it. If you want to hear more, maybe we'll shoot the video a little bit more, or somebody can ask me questions.
Yeah.
But right now, it's about making sure you get that attorney. And making sure people are aware that it's not protest, cry, or whine. You're in a mess. Don't give up and do what they tell you to. Stay fighting. Because if you're going to stay drinking, if you're going to stay on drugs, if you're going to whine and cry and say this is wrong and not do what you're supposed to do, you're going to lose your kids. That's it. It is what it is. And I'm here to help change it.
Okay, thank you.